This is Nattering with E with Eric Friedlander. What up, world? It's your boy E coming at you from the Nattering with E studios, letting you know that we are now proud members of the Visionaries of Global Media family. Catch us Wednesdays and sometimes some other random days, and check out some of the other shows too. Band from Ringside, led by Jason B. Good Cop, Bad Cop with Graham, Matt, and Ryan, and our favorite pod, ROH Revelry with Will and High Five Tom every Saturday. What up, High Fivers? It's your boy Eric Frieds telling you to tune in to ROH Revelry with Tom and Will every Saturday. This is Nattering with E with your host, Eric Friedlander. When you start to shake your face and then I want to say, in my heart, my heart, and I keep. If you ever had a choice, baby, choose me. I'll wait for the day, but it might be too late. If the world keeps rushing down, I'll be this loudest light in the crowd. And if that day comes, choose me. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wait for the day when the night be too late. If the world comes crashing down, be loud as man in the crowd. And if that day comes, choose me. Okay, so before I get sued for playing that song, that was Danko Jones's Choose Me off of 2009's B-Sides. The song is basically about wanting to be chosen and just accepted and things like that. And to be honest with you, when it comes to doing these pods, that's what we're trying to do too. Just be accepted. Just have people to schmooze with. One of the ideas that I had with this pod literally was to talk to people. Reason being was I don't really talk at my 9 to 5. In fact, I'm not bashing my 9 to 5 or anything, but like, you know, when the writing's on the wall that maybe you got to change some stuff up. I think the writing might be on the wall. I'm not, if anyone from that randomly hears this, I'm not resigning or anything like that, but I don't know, man. Everything that I've pointed towards with the stats and things like that for the pod point to maybe 5 people listening, which, like, don't get me wrong, I totally appreciate it and everything, but like, I shouldn't be begging people to hang out with me, you know? I love my co-hosts to death. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's always a good time with them, but like, I don't want to beg either and be like, please come on the pod. Please, 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 please. I beg of you. Not what I want to do. All I want to do, pick a topic, shoot the breeze for an hour, maybe even 2, and go from there. So what I'm thinking is that what I might do, I've spoken about it before on previous episodes. If anyone's listened with any regularity, thank you. But also, I've toyed with the idea of going solo on a lot of the stuff, and then just having co-hosts on every now and again. That way, it freshens up the pod, but also It avoids that conflict potentially of people being like, "Oh, you're putting too much pressure on me, man." Things like that. Which then brings me to today's topic, which is rooting for teams that are bad, but wanting more when they improve. Now, if you've talked to me online or you know me at all, or if you're just stumbling across the pod, let me tell you, my whole life I have rooted for frustrating sports teams, even borderline bad sports teams. The Toronto Maple Leafs, the Cincinnati Bengals, West Ham United, the Oakland A's, and the LA Clippers. The one thing, even though it's spread out across a bunch of sports, the one thing that all these teams have is that they peak in the first or second round if they make the playoffs, or the odd time like Cincinnati went to a Super Bowl a couple years ago, and that was like freaking amazing. But as someone who's watched the team forever, you're always thinking to yourself, okay, when's the bad stuff going to happen? When are they going to screw things up? When is the league going to screw them over? Or things like that. And in that game, they were literally up with a minute left in the game, 20-17. And no, yeah, 20-17. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, first time in my life, one of my teams is going to win a championship. But what do? Get a penalty called for holding on a phantom call. The guy was, I will hold to this day, and my friends who I've spoken to about this, who are Chiefs fans, have said that there clearly was a hold. There was no hold. He barely touched the guy, if at all. And they called that for a 15-yard penalty. Then 2 seconds later, guy goes offside. Another 5-yard penalty. Uh, Next play, another pass interference call. Next thing you know, the Rams go down to the end zone, score a game-winning touchdown, and win the game 23-20. So it was close, but not the time that it's meant to be. And as someone who's been a fan of teams like this, where it's like close but no cigar, you start to think to yourself, is it ever going to happen? Is anything ever going to happen? Uh, with my current state that I wanted to talk about with the Leafs and also West Ham and even the Bengals and to a lesser extent the Clippers, is I don't know if these teams will ever win a title. Like the other day, I was thinking to myself, you know, it's one thing for the Leafs to be this frustrating since 1967, which is a long, long time. That's almost 60 years to not win a title. And for them to always be frustrating, it's like the surprise is more that they aren't frustrating, that they are winning games and they are playing well. Like that's more of the surprise. When they don't show up in the playoffs, you're like, seen it before. They've done it every year for the last 9 years with this group. Oh, what's going to change? What are they giving me to believe? And that's the thing too, that nobody wants to address that elephant in the room when they do these post game press conferences, because that reporter would look like a jerk to the players. But you honestly want to say to them, you guys have been together for almost a decade now and can't get out of the first round, or when you did, you got wrecked in the next round. What makes you believe that it's going to change? And if they say something like, you just got to keep the faith and keep on pushing, it's like, I would agree with that the first time, but like we're on try number 9 now. I spoke about this on Twitter earlier about how you're always hoping, praying, pleading for your team to just do something, anything at all that's successful. There's nothing more frustrating than knowing that the other team is not as good as you and they can still get a point. Or, in fact, that's the one day that they decide, hey, I'm going to play very well and I'm going to whoop your butt. I'm not saying Boston hasn't played well, because they have, don't get me wrong. But as a Leaf fan, you've seen this rodeo too many times before where you're just like, they need to figure out a way to get over them. The weird thing is that the way that the Leafs are constructed is literally to beat Boston, and they can't. This is the one team that if they're going to shoot their shot and not do anything the rest of the playoffs, this is the one team that they want to beat. One team. And time again, the guys that they paid all of most of their salary cap to don't show up. And you know what? It got me thinking that in other sports, like specifically soccer or football in Europe, there's very much like a tribal connection. And what I mean by that is that people can like if you're a West Ham fan, you absolutely cannot be like, oh, but I like Arsenal too. I mean, it's a free world. You can technically, but most people will be like, well, I'm not going to be your friend. I'm not going to hang out with you. None of that jazz. They're just going to be like, hey, man, don't do that. West Ham's your team. You got to stick with your team. You can't go with the wind and just go with the bigger clubs all the time. There was this notion actually in the West Ham game yesterday where uh, West Ham's been to Europe the last couple of years. They went to Europa twice and they went to the Europa Conference League and won it last year amid a terrible like regular like domestic campaign season. And the media was saying, you shouldn't fire the coaches. Maybe you guys have just shot your shot and you've peaked. You should just, as fans, you should just be grateful for that. And I disagree completely. And I know a lot of people online disagree completely with that notion. And the Leafs feel that way too, in that like, look, your star player almost got 70 goals, he got 69, but now you want a cup too? Like, whoa, that's a little too much to ask for. And that is not a logical way of thinking. Because whether your teams are ridiculously good or terribly bad, but you're hoping that they improve, you're not just hoping that they improve, you're hoping that your team that's terribly bad becomes the team that winning is second nature, that you have such a high bar to this that you're just like, look, I want to I want my team to win. I don't want my team to just win a Europa Conference League that the year after they win, they literally change the name of the trophy because the other teams around them were like, that's maybe too rich of a name to call this cup. So think about that for a second. They say, "Oh, you peaked by winning this cup," but then the next year they say that cup doesn't even count anymore because it's not affiliated with Europa or the Champions League. That doesn't make sense, does it? I don't think so, anyways. So your goal this year, West Ham went into the quarterfinals, and they were able to. They played a powerhouse in Bayern Leverkusen, but they had them on the ropes in the second game. And if they didn't have a if they didn't have a coach that was more or less like defense, 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 let's limit the amount of goals, maybe they push forward. Maybe they break this unbelievable winning streak that Bayern Leverkusen's on, or they give them a very good run for their money to try and actually win the um, quarterfinal and then go on to the Europa final and then move on to the Champions League. The fact that the media specifically wants fans in both as a Leaf fan, as a Bengals fan, as a Clippers fan, as a Oakland A's fan, as a West Ham fan, they want you to say, you know what? You're middle of the table or you're below middle of the table. That's where you should be happy. That's where you should be satisfied. That's the wrong approach. Because why can't any of the teams that I just listed off be champions or go further or attract better talent or better talent? Because the higher you go up the standings, the more likely a star free agent in one of your leagues is going to want to come to play for you. Why is that so wrong? Why is it that no Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup in almost 32 years? It's one Toronto's almost double that with close to 60 years of no Stanley Cup. But for the entire nation to not have, that just seems crazy to me. Like you're telling me that not only is the ownership or management or the league incompetent towards Toronto, but they're also incompetent towards the rest of the teams. Now, if you don't believe me that the league has nothing to do with that and that it's just pure incompetence on the franchise's part, look no further than the 2014-15 NHL season. That was the season where none, zero of the Canadian teams won to qualify for the playoffs. When they did the ratings for the actual playoffs, it was the lowest playoff ratings on TV ever in the NHL because there were literally no Canadian teams. And if you notice as well, throughout the years, once Edmonton, Vancouver, Ottawa, Montreal, Calgary go out, or Winnipeg go out, nobody's watching. Notice how I didn't include the Leafs there? Reason being, they'd never go that far. They never get by the first round. And in that year, 14-15, going into the 15-16 season, because the ratings were so low, that following year when the Canadian teams continued to struggle, luckily a couple did end up making the playoffs in that 15-16 season. However, there was no Toronto, there was no Montreal, there was no Winnipeg, there was no Vancouver. And so if you don't think the league noticed that, look at the draft. I'm not saying conspiracy theory or anything like that, but like Leafs got Austin Matthews, Vancouver got Elias Patterson, Winnipeg got Patrick Laine, like three really, really good players. And it allowed them to build the teams up in the following season. All three of those teams made the playoffs. They may not have gone far, but like my point stands. The league noticed and the league gave them this opportunity to have better players on the team. My point is, almost a decade later, the Leafs still can't get out of the first round, or if they do, it's just barely. And then they get killed by a team like Florida or a team like Tampa Bay. I'm not saying those aren't good teams, but there's no way that you can justify to me that teams in Florida or Carolina or places that are not too known for their hockey fans should be the ones with the dynasties. Even the Rangers haven't won since 1994. And like, that's insane to me. Like, some of these original six teams have not won in decades. Last year, literally, the Vegas Golden Knights, a team that's only been in the league for 3 years, won the Stanley Cup. And you're telling me that, like, that's good for the league? I guess it's good for the league in terms of this new team just automatically hit everything in 3 years and was able to basically get a Stanley Cup out of it. Like, that is impressive, don't get me wrong, but and it's good for that market because like, oh wow, Vegas is a really good team. However, the fact that none of the original six teams have won in like almost 8 years. I think Chicago last won it in actually 15-16, the year that Matthews was drafted. The fact that that's a thing is crazy. You have your original franchises that didn't win a cup. You have all the Canadian teams haven't won a cup in 30 some odd years, and you have one of your two newest franchises somehow able to manipulate the cap so that they can be way over. If the cap's 80 million, I think they're close to 100 million with their contracts, but because it's the playoffs, contracts don't matter. And so I guess my point is the league wants parity, which I understand. You don't want the same winners over and over again. However, Vegas, very good team. Tampa Bay, very good team. Florida, very good team. I wouldn't be surprised if Florida wins the whole thing this year. And the one trend that I'm trying to get at is that we don't know if the NHL is choosing these teams, as Danko Jones spoke about in the beginning of the podcast, or if this is just hard work by those teams. Those teams specifically, if you interview them, they'll say it's hard work. I say if Boston or New York, or if Toronto somehow comes back and does it and they don't get by Florida or Carolina, I don't know, man. I really don't know if it's those teams being better or if it's the other teams not being equipped for it. Like for instance, when it, to tie it back to the Leafs, it's been 9 years. They've made or 8 or 9 years according to the media because Shanahan comes in, clears house of the previous regime. Babcock for a couple of years as the coach. Um, they get they sign Riley, they sign Matthews, Marner, Nylander are all drafted by the team. Tavares comes in as a free agent to supposedly put them over the top. And then next thing you know, 75% of their cap goes to those like five guys. And so the argument forever was just like, well, forever being the last like decade of these guys being together was how are we going to pay the other guys? This year specifically, they have that talent where it should not just be Matthews has to score, else we can't score. And they literally want it to be Matthews has to score, no one else can score. Why that's a thing, I have absolutely no idea if your goal is to win the Stanley Cup. They say their goal is to win the Stanley Cup, but there's no way, as I noted earlier, there is no way that you are built to beat Boston the way that they've constructed it. They should be beating them, or the series should be tied 2-2. And you should be able to basically carry that momentum forward and go on a run. There's somehow, even with all the offense, they were the second highest scoring team in the league, the Leafs. They haven't been shut out in 249 games. But you're telling me that Jeremy Swayman, who is a good goalie, can go 6-0 against them in almost 7-0 in the last 7 games. They haven't won a playoff home game in 4 games in the last 2 years. And they are claiming that the calls are going against them. At this point, they have to realize guys like Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, Riley, the core of five guys have to realize that they have to steer the ship. It shouldn't be up to guys like Joel Edmondson getting 2 glorious chances. That guy's never going to score. You and I both know that. No knock on him. He's a very good defensive defender, but the guy hasn't scored a goal in 4 years. What are the odds he's going to score on those plays? You're telling me that Marner is more concerned with a tripping call than, getting up, get the puck, and drive to the net. They're going to be talking about this in the media forever, whether the Leafs advance or if they lose on Tuesday, about how the big three, Nylander, Marner, Matthews, 3 guys that they drafted really high. Matthews fourth, Matthews first overall, Marner fifth, Nylander eighth. They're 3 franchise guys yelling at each other on the bench. Matthews not returning because he was too sick, quote unquote. But then Marner finally showing up in this series and putting the team on his back to go and get another goal. He scored a very good goal to make it 3-1. Problem was they stopped after that. And it makes no sense because the way that they're trying to defend and the way that they're trying to hold off Boston goes against everything that the Leafs do. What I mean by that is that if you watch the regular season, the Leafs literally love to run and gun. They care more about offense than they do about defense. That's literally what it's been for years. Everybody always says, oh, they need to get a better defenseman or they need to get better goalie or things like that. They don't. What they need are defensemen who will shoot the puck. This is the first year where you've had everybody shooting, not just Riley, but you had Edmondson 2 shots last night, Labushkin 2 shots last night, Brody had a couple shots, McCabe had a couple, uh, Riley himself had a couple, and so the defense are trying. The There's no way in a perfect world, and in the way that the Leafs are overhyped in this city, and I'll say that as a diehard Leaf fan, there's no way that when you're playing 4-on-4 and then 4-on-3, and you run your big four forwards out there, Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, there is no fathomable way that they can justify those four guys not even getting a shot on net during that. There's no way. These guys are, to go back to my point about West Ham, there's more tribalism in European football. The thing too is that when you can tell that a player in soccer football is not for the team and just for their stats, they call those guys mercenaries. In And they're usually not with the team for very much longer after that. They usually move on to a bigger team that is full of mercenaries. Literally, the big six teams in soccer are not guys who grew up diehard Man City or Man United fans. They're literally guys who get paid 300 million euros a year and want to hit bonuses on their contracts. If you notice too, with going back to the regular season with the Leafs, um, Matthews, they literally spent the last 3 weeks of the season, as opposed to working on their special teams, trying to get Matthews 70 goals, Marner a bunch of assists, Nylander 100 points. Why? Bonuses. Money talks. These guys are showing that they are not about the Leafs at all. They are not about the team. They're not about playing for the jersey. They are about making money. In the playoffs, you don't get paid because you should only the owners get the money in the playoffs. And then at the end, if you win the Stanley Cup, you get a bonus, and then everybody gets a cut of that share of the revenue that the owner made. They have to then pay the players some of that. These guys only care about the almighty dollar sign, and that is what is wrong with this current team. They don't care about a Stanley Cup. They could care less if they win or lose anything. They just want their money. That's literally what it is. And until they win and go far and show some heart or care for the team or try to get the fans involved and stuff, it'll never happen. And the problem is living in Toronto, you're supposed to be fine with that. And I don't know if I am. I've been watching this team for so long that I'll probably keep watching, because at this point it's just pure masochism. But honestly, I just don't know if this is the right group. To me, Shanahan's the wrong guy too to get out to be the president of the team. He keeps running it back every year. Every year he says these are going to be the core guys that are going to get us through to the next round. We're going to build statues and championships off of these guys. And honestly, if the Leafs weren't run by a major corporation that could care less about winning, I don't know if he's here. Also, it's been about 8 years, and they're supposed to be bringing in a new CEO. And to me, that guy's going to be like, you guys haven't won. Why do you deserve to stay? You fired your last GM because he said maybe we got to make some changes after they got smoked by Florida. Then you bring in a guy who's more of a yes man. They do nothing. And I don't know. I don't know if you deserve to stay, man. Anyways, so I just wanted to rant about that a little bit today. And I figure because it's my podcast, it's literally called Nattering with E, or Nattering with Eric, talking with Eric. So I'm going to talk. I mentioned at the beginning that I do this so that I don't go mute. And honestly, I need to get this Leaf stuff off my chest. I need to get this sports stuff off my chest. So if anyone's listening, I appreciate you. If nobody's listening, whatever. I'm just gonna put out a bunch of episodes and people can listen. Or I can listen back and you know, it's like John Candy said in the movie Spaceballs. I'm a Mog. I'm half man, half dog. I'm my own best friend. So having said that, there's only one thing left to say. Keep on cheering for a win. Your boy E is here for you whenever. Peace.